It's 9 o'clock, we'll strike it. The November 16th, 2023 hearing for the Planning and Land Development Regulation Commission is now called to order. And if I could have everyone please silence any audible devices that you may have. And if you would please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good morning, everyone. I would like to thank everyone for joining us this morning. And Ms. Tucker, could I please have the roll call?
Absolutely. Good morning. Member Craig? Member Bender? Member Shelley?
Here.
Member Costa?
Here.
Member Patterson? Here. Member Sixma?
Here.
And Chair Mills.
Here.
Thank
Thank you, Ms. Tucker. Okay, we do have some minutes for discussion this morning from the October 19th, 2023 meeting. Is there any discussion on those minutes?
I'll make a motion for approval.
Yeah, I got a motion to approve the minutes from October 19th, 2023 from Ms. Shelley and a second from Mr. Sixma. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Okay. If anyone would like to speak for or against any of the cases being heard today, if I could get you to please fill out a form at the back of the dais and give it to Ms. Tucker to my immediate left. And we will be limiting you to a 3-minute time limit. After the comments have been heard, I will give the applicant an opportunity to address any concerns the speakers have and answer any questions the commissioners may have. And at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Soria for legal comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And this is a reminder for members of the public as well as the applicants that decisions by this body on special exception cases and cases which rezone real property from one classification to another pursuant to the zoning ordinance are recommendations only to the county council and do not constitute a final hearing. New evidence may be introduced at the county council public hearing. Decisions on variances made by this body constitute final action, subject to an appeal to the county council. And what this means is that no new evidence may be presented at the time of the county council public hearing on the appeal. An aggrieved party that appeals such a decision is confined to the record made before this body. Hearings by this body on rezonings, special exceptions, and variances are quasi-judicial in nature, meaning that this body is acting more like a court and must take into account all oral, written, or demonstrative evidence presented. Their decisions on these cases must be based on competent substantial evidence on the record, and competent substantial evidence has been defined as that evidence a reasonable mind would accept to support a conclusion. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Soria. And while on legal comments, I would like to ask the commission to disclose for the record any ex parte communications that have occurred before or during the public hearing at which a vote is to be taken on any quasi-judicial matter. And I'll start with my immediate right with Ms. Craig. Mr. Bender? Ms. Shelley?
None.
None.
Mr. Costa?
None. None.
And I have none. Okay, we do not have any items to be continued or withdrawn, so we're going to move right into our unfinished old business. Ms. Shelley, could I get you to read that case into the record, please?
Yes, sir. Case number S-23-006. Application of Stephen Buswell, Parker Minchenberg and Associates, LLC, agent for the owners, requesting an amendment to a special exception for a non-exempt excavation on forestry resource zoned property. The property is located at State Road 44, DeLand.
Thank you, Ms.
Go ahead.
Ms. Shelley. Trish, this is yours. Ms. Smith?
Okay, here we go. All right, we have an active excavation on State Road 44. It's approximately a half a mile east of I-4. You all have seen this before. It's called the Kemcho excavation. It was approved by the County Council in June of 2019. It's a special exception for a non-exempt excavation, and it was approved under our old excavation ordinance. The applicant is approved to mine just over 1 million cubic yards of fill from 4 pits. And they have 6 years to complete the project and replant the site. The approved project requires a distance of 150 feet between the excavation and the wetlands. The developers in the past have argued that the distance should be the same as the Water Management District standard of 50 feet, and they requested that we review our ordinance requirements. Our county council did review that, and a new excavation ordinance was approved in December of 2021. The council disagreed with the developers and increased the distance requirement from 150 to 250 feet between the excavation and the wetlands. The new ordinance allows for a lesser distance if the applicant can prove that there will be no temporary or permanent drawdown of the surrounding wetlands during dewatering activities. And the dewatering plans must be reviewed by a third-party hydrogeologist or engineer. And Kemcho did go through that process, and they applied to expand the excavation this year under the new provision so that they can dig an additional 542,000 cubic yards beyond what has already been approved. The application provided by the developer included a request to reduce the wetland setback to 50 feet. The third-party review of the dewatering plan noted that there will be a temporary drawdown of the wetlands and that the applicant is following in standard industry practices. Our environmental team does not support reducing the distance between the pit and the wetlands. If the expansion is approved, they will not support it unless there is a minimum 75-foot setback. That includes a minimum 25-foot setback plus the additional 50-foot buffer for the natural resource management area. If no expansion is approved, the applicant can continue with the excavation under the approved development order to mine that 1 million cubic yards in the 4 pits, with the distance separation remaining at 150 feet from the wetlands. If you recommend forwarding to the county council for approval of the expanded excavation, we do recommend that the original conditions of the excavation still apply, that Kemcho coordinate with the environmental team to resolve any potential environmental violations that may be out there. We're asking the timeline to be extended for 2 years, and that the top of the bank of the dewatering area cannot be any closer than 75 feet to the wetlands. The applicant is present and does have a presentation for you, and we also have our environmental permitting team in the room if you have any technical questions for the environmental group.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. Mr. Acosta, I gotta figure out who's up here.
Can you repeat that one comment about what the council said? They went in for 150 and the council increased it to 200. Can you repeat that whole sentence for me, please?
Yes, sir. We were asked to look to reduce the buffer to 50 feet, which is consistent with the Water Management District standards. Our council felt like our wetlands are very valuable and they wanted to see more protection instead of less, so they increased the distance to 250 feet.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to clarify a little bit about that. So the previous ordinance had 150 feet with no ability to deviate. It's 150 regardless. So what they did was they increased that to 250, but they put in a mechanism saying you can get closer so long as you demonstrate there is no temporary or permanent drawdown of the water table. And you can get close, you can actually get closer than the 150 feet on the previous ordinance. However, they put a minimum distance of you can't get closer than approximately 75 feet to the wetland.
But all the other items still apply. You still have to prove that there's no drawdown, there's no permanent damage, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes.
Okay.
So they basically increased the default to 250, but they allowed a mechanism to get closer so long as you're not actually affecting the wetland. Under the previous rule, there was no consideration. It's 150 feet regardless of whether or not you can prove that you're not affecting the wetland or not. So it's a little bit of give and take.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Ms. Smith, I also wanted to clarify something. This report states from the private consulting firm that there is going to be a temporary drawdown. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
So are we even allowed to do this variance if so be it?
Well, that's I mean, you are the ultimate determiner of fact. So, we have that consultant's report. If the applicant can present, other evidence that says there is no drawdown, or that we're not looking at it in the correct way, that's up to the council. But right now, our rules say that in order to get closer than 250 feet for any new or amended borrow pit, you need to demonstrate that there is no temporary or permanent drawdown.
Right. I want to clarify myself. That's a special exception, not a variance. So we're just making a recommendation to the council.
That's correct.
Okay. All right. That's all my questions. Is the applicant present? Yes, sir. Just right there.
Thank you.
And if I could get your name and address for the record, sir?
Absolutely. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. I'm an attorney. My name is J. Christie Wilson III. I have the privilege of representing Chemtro Investment Group, LLC, the owner of the property, here today. I'd like to make a few preparatory remarks. And by the way, my address is 601 North Fern Creek Avenue in Orlando, Florida. That's where my office is. I'd like to make a few preparatory remarks, and then I will be calling 2 witnesses today.
Okay.
I would first of all state we've heard a reference to a report by an outside consultant. I don't know if that consultant is here today to testify to that report so that he can be cross-examined on it. And failing that, I object to the admission of that report as hearsay. And we are operating under a quasi-judicial scenario here. So that report, I would object to its admission or consideration unless the consultant is here to testify to it. I will, however, state with respect to that report that we read the report completely differently. And I don't know if you have that report in your packet, but we read it completely differently than does county staff, because there is a preparatory or prefatory portion of that report that says if you dig a borrow pit, there will be a drawdown of water unless you employ measures to counter that. And then the consultant goes on and says, we've looked at what they've done, they've met industry standards, and we're going to talk about that in our testimony. But effectively what we have is we have 3 years of experience with the water table and the wetlands. And what is employed to keep that water table up, anytime you dig a hole, whether it's a retention pond or whatever, you're going to have a drawdown of water if you don't employ recharge mechanisms. So what we do, and what we've done effectively for 3 years, and there are staff gauges which monitor the water levels that prove this, is we have a pumping system. And before there's any excavation, there's a pipe that's put in underground underneath the excavation site. And that pipe has a sock on the end of it, and we'll have an exhibit here in a minute to show you what that is. That is inserted, it's attached to a pump. And the pump is used to pump the pond so that you can excavate. But that water is immediately pumped to a spreading swale that immediately puts the water back in the wetlands. And over the 3-year period of operation, there has not been any degradation to the wetlands. In fact, the water level, we believe, in the wetlands has gone up. We're going to call 2 witnesses today to testify to that. The first is Steve Buswell, who's an engineer, a drainage engineer, a landscape architect, specializing in hydrology, drainage, who was involved in the design of the ponds. Then we're going to call a biologist, Amy Daly, who's with a recognized firm, CPH, specializes in biology, expert in wetlands, wetland systems, wetland health, and they will both testify that what we're proposing not only will not have a permanent impact to the wetlands, but won't even have a temporary drawdown or a temporary impact to the wetlands. If you read the report that was generated by the county's consultant, I would encourage you to read it carefully. Read the second part, not just the first part, because the first part talks about what happens if you don't employ a recharge mechanism in developing a pond. With that, I would call my first witness, who is Mr. Steve Buswell.
Okay, could I pause you just for a moment? I interrupt you, I apologize. Mr. Soria, are we the proper board to litigate the third-party consultant's
So you can take into account all
recommendation?
evidence. So there is no exclusionary rule in this type of hearing. So, when someone says hearsay, right, this is The due process provision does not take into account all of the evidentiary code. So hearsay testimony is not automatically excluded. You can give its appropriate weight. Now, they are permitted to cross-examine any party or any witnesses, and that should take into account your provision of what is factual. But ultimately, your recommending body, they have the opportunity to provide factual information at the county council, and the county council is the final decision maker. And then remember, they can take into account additional evidence and new evidence. So there is no exclusionary rule if someone says, hey, that's hearsay. So you can take into account, right now you are engaged in a fact-finding phase to determine whether or not they meet the criteria of the new code for their expansion of the borrow pit.
Okay, is the consulting, anybody from the consulting firm here? So we would not be able to ask the questions of the consulting firm of the discrepancy that the gentleman is speaking of.
Yes, but you can take into account both sets of information, make your determination on that one.
Okay, so we can proceed.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you for, I apologize for interrupting you.
The only thing, take into account that the fact that the consultant is not here to answer questions, but the report is there, whether or not there is a factual basis of the report, you can take that into account.
Okay, thank you.
I would just like to note for the record that I object to that report because I am being denied the opportunity to cross-examine the author of that report in front of this body. And with that, I will call my first witness.
Okay.
Mr. Buswell, where would you like the witness to?
You can go there and I just need his name and address for the record also.
I'll give you that.
This one's good.
Would you please give us your full name and address, sir?
Yes, Steve Buswell with Parker Minchenberg and Associates, 1729 Ridgewood Avenue, Holly Hill.
Okay. Go ahead.
Mr. Minchenberg, what is your...
Buswell. I work for Parker Minchenberg.
Speaker.
Yeah, both of the microphones
You
are
got,
working.
yeah, you got the other microphone. there.
Mr. Buswell, would you please state your specialty?
I am in land development, which focuses on drainage and utility and all the aspects of construction.
What is your educational background, sir?
I have a bachelor's degree and master's in engineering from the University of Florida.
What areas of engineering do you specialize in, sir?
Drainage, utilities, parking layouts, everything associated with land development.
As an engineer, have you previously been called upon to give expert testimony?
Yes.
Sir, I would ask you to take a minute and talk to us about retention ponds and borrow pits. Well, let's talk about borrow pits. If we dig a borrow pit and we provide no remedial measures, will that borrow pit result in a dropping of the water table?
Yes.
If we provide remedial measures, and we'll get into what those are in a second, would you anticipate any drop in the water table?
No.
I would like to, I have a handout that I'd like to have the opportunity to give each of the commissioners. And there's,
You need to give it to Ms. Tucker to my immediate left, please. This will also be submitted to the county council when it goes to them after the recommendation.
I would, Mr. Chairman, I would respectfully like to refer to this as Composite Exhibit A.
Okay?
Of this hearing. Okay, Mr. Buswell, taking composite Exhibit A, would you briefly describe for the commission the operation of a water recharge system that is utilized in conjunction with a borrow pit?
Okay. Probably it's easiest to start with this exhibit. So the dewatering methods that are proposed and being utilized at the Chemcho site are in the form of a kind of drawdown sock. So what occurs is the stock's placed probably about 20 to 22 feet below the surface. It's excavated down. You utilize that sock to basically pull the water from where the area that you're proposing to excavate. So that water comes out actually almost filtered through the sand, and then the sock has another fabric around it to actually act as a restriction to keep sediment from being discharged off-site.
Is there a picture of the pipe and sock in the handout
Yes.
that's been given?
That is on the second page. And this is, it's a standard, HDPE type sock system. Has perforated holes that allow the water to be pulled through it. So once this is in place,
Keep interrupting you. Does that sock remove any turbidity issues with the water that finds its way to the wetlands?
yes. As a result and permitting requirements of the Water Management District, because we receive both an ERP, Environmental Resource Permit, as well as the Consumptive Use Permit, they restrict discharge to below 29 NTUs, which is the unit of measurement for turbidity. So what is coming out of this sock is actually, like I had mentioned before, filtered, cleaner water. So this water, when we pull it from underneath where the area is being excavated, it immediately gets pumped into a spreader swale so you don't have point
Is there a
source
picture of
discharge.
that in your handout?
Yes. This is on the first page that you're looking at here. This is actually the plan that was permitted by the district and the county. What this shows is the spreader swale that eliminates the kind of point discharge or a concentrated where you could have erosion occur. It actually spreads it out over an area of 200 lineal feet. This water then stages up as it's pumped and discharges directly into the wetland. So what is actually occurring is, kind of think of it as a water balance where you're pulling water from underneath here, you're pumping it on top of the wetland, then it's back into the groundwater, and it creates this circle, basically a closed loop system. The impacts to the water table would occur if we were not utilizing recharge or rehydration to those wetlands. If we were pumping it to a ditch off-site, then yes, you're losing that water. But the fact that we keep it basically in a closed loop system, the effects, there are none. So that is kind of what's been permitted by the district. This is the preferred method, and is mentioned in the Terracon report, consistent with industry standards. So this is the preferred method of dewatering.
Is the Water Management District concerned also about drawdowns?
Yes, they,
And have they accepted this recharge system as a means of preventing drawdowns?
yes.
In your opinion, sir, if this commission votes to recommend approval of Chemcho's permit that you filed, will there be any temporary or permanent drawdown of the wetlands?
No.
Thank you. I have no further questions of this gentleman at this time. Does the commission have any questions?
Okay. We don't have anyone. My question to Mr. Buswell is this: when you're drawing down and you're pumping back into the wetlands, that rate of applying the water to the wetlands is not going to be, the infiltration rate will not be as great as the actual pumping rate. Is that correct?
It stabilizes over time.
Over time.
Yeah, once you start, it'll reach an equilibrium where what is coming out of the SOX is what's going into the wetlands.
So you would say that it wouldn't artificially elevate the wetlands, is what you're telling me?
Correct.
So the wetlands elevation would remain the same because it weighs itself out?
Yes.
Even though the pumping rate was probably going to be higher than what the infiltration rate? How do you determine what the infiltration rate is?
It's based on site-specific parameters.
Okay. So you don't know what the infiltration rate is?
No, we had soil
You
borings
do.
taken, yes.
So what you're telling me is that the water that you're pumping out, that you're not going to artificially elevate the actual wetland?
Correct. And there's staff gauges that support that there's no changes to the elevation of the water table.
Because that would be one of the concerns I would have, would be the fact, not only the turbidity, but you're saying you've compensated yourself for that, but by extending your discharge line out 240 feet, I think is what you said. But my concern would be to elevating the actual wetlands and making your wetlands be actually go further than what it actually should, so then it would get out of the wetlands as your
Right.
discharge.
Right. This site is also contained from a standpoint of surrounding topography. As you can see through Trish's report, that initial, aerial exhibit, you're bounded throughout the site with higher water or top of bank elevations that kind of hold that water back. So it's functioning as it's currently existing now and has been for years. And yes, you don't want to raise the water table up so high that you basically drown the wetlands, ironically.
Yes.
But as I understand it, the wetlands, in reading, because we're required to provide the monitoring reports, there's a biologist that provides an annual report to the district as part of the environmental resource permit that basically states there are no negligible impacts to the existing wetland system out there.
So you got documentation of the infiltration rate compared to the discharge rate?
I have how much they have discharged, basically have drawn out. There's actually in those reports, I believe they were included in Trish's staff report, the annual monitoring reports that have the amount of water that is being pulled from the SOC system and then being placed on top of the wetland. So that information is in the report.
Okay. Okay, I'll refer to staff for that. Okay, that was all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Anybody else?
No, we don't have anyone else. Okay.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Mr. Boswell. I would next call Ms. Amy Daly.
Good morning. I get your name and address for the record, please.
Good morning. My name is Amy Daly. My business address for CPH is at 1117 East Robinson Street, Orlando, Florida.
Okay.
What is your occupation, Ms. Daly?
My occupation is an environmental consultant.
And what is your educational background?
I have a degree in biological sciences from Florida State University and a master's of business administration from FMU.
Have you been recognized by any court as an expert witness in the areas of biology and wetlands?
Yes, I have.
Can you name a few of the proceedings where you've been recognized?
Yes, it was for the off-ramp of I-4 at the St. Johns River. It was the case for the landowner versus the DOT. There are several proceedings that I have worked on that have gone to mediation, where I've been deposed all over Central Florida.
What is your expertise in wetlands?
My expertise in wetlands consists of assessing conditions for environmental permitting or restoration, enhancement, preservation, creation. I do mitigation design, mitigation bank permitting, and compliance monitoring for wetlands, habitat functional assessments, threatened endangered species assessments, and water quality both in freshwater and estuarine systems.
Have you had an opportunity to examine the wetlands on the Chemtrail property?
Yes, I have.
Have you reached any conclusions about the condition of those wetlands?
Yes, they are functioning normally. The hydrology is present. There are areas of inundation, areas of saturation. The wetland vegetation is a diverse species composition, very healthy. And the hydric soils, there was a presence of muck at the surface where water was not inundated, and the muck was saturated.
Do you find any impairment of the wetlands as a result of the roughly 3 years of operation of the Chemtrail borrow pit?
No, I did not.
I should say borrow pits, so there's 3 of them, soon to be 4. Do you have an opinion as to whether, if this commission recommends approval of Chemtrail's application, there would be any impact to the wetlands?
I don't believe so. The system is monitored on a daily basis and then reported annually to St. Johns River Water Management District. They are required by their permit that was issued by St. Johns to have no adverse impacts on the wetlands.
Would that requirement of St. John's apply also to the application that's now before this commission?
Yes.
So if someone were to say there's going to be a negative impact to the wetlands, you would disagree with that, is that correct?
I would.
That's all I have. Open her for any questions that the board might have.
It doesn't look like we've got any questions. One of the things that what we're looking at, this special exception, is not only re-permitting, extending the permit, but we're looking at the setback. So that, even though you have documentation of sending the water back into the wetlands, what type of documentation do you have as far as the setback?
Ms. Daly, do you believe that a setback of 75 feet would provide any additional protection to the wetlands as opposed to a setback of 50 feet?
No, I do not.
And why is that?
The applicant has taken into engineering standard practices to come up with a rehydration system. St. Johns River Water Management District has developed their criteria over decades and has determined that a 50-foot buffer is appropriate for this type of work.
Does it matter on what the depth of the excavation is?
That would be a question for the engineer.
Okay.
I will call Mr. Buswell back to answer that
Okay.
question.
All right. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Mr. Buswell. Did you, I presume, heard the question? Does the depth of the pond make any difference in the setback?
No,
And why is that?
because the hydration is still on top of the wetland, saturating and infiltrating through the top area. As it's pulled down, again, it's recycled. The only amount of water that's actually leaving the wetland area or wetland system would be what is within the actual borrow material, which is a 10% number. So it's standard.
Okay, so you're saying that the distance and the depth is within industry standards, because I know a lot of excavation they determine it on like the buildings and stuff like that. For every foot you go down, you need to be a foot of separation, so on and so forth. I don't know what the standard is on the borrow pits.
It's standard for
For setback.
any detention pond, whether it's a stormwater treatment system. There's really no difference from a hydraulical standpoint, that once you actually take that water and put it on top of the wetland, you're hydrating the wetland regardless of the distance.
Okay. In your request on your special exception, you're requesting a 50-foot setback, and you notated something of 75 feet. What was that reference to?
The county is, I believe in their recommendation, saying if you approve it, they want a minimum of 75-foot setback.
Correct.
And my point is simply that that provides no additional protection to the hydrology of the wetlands.
Okay.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
If it pleases you, we do have Ginger Adair, our environmental director, in the audience, as well as our forester, and they can speak to wetlands, wetland buffers, and the questions that you're asking
Okay.
in relation to the county ordinance.
I'm going to let the gentleman do his presentation, and then we'll get them up on the public participation and see if we can get some answers as to why they're coming up with the 75 feet or even the 150 or the 250. But we need some questions answered, and then what I'll do is I'll give you a chance for rebuttal after they have spoken.
Mr. Chair, may I also be afforded the opportunity to cross-examine them?
No, not here.
Mr. Chair, actually, because he's the applicant, one of the requirements are to cross-examine any witnesses of either of the parties.
Okay. Yes, you can.
Thank you, Your Honor.
I'm not an attorney.
I would simply reiterate that I think we've established that there's no detriment to the wetlands, there's no drawdown, either temporary or permanent, and we would ask that the application be granted.
All right, so, well, I do have a question from Ms. Craig before you leave. Sir?
Yes.
I do have a question from one of the commissioners, Ms. Craig.
Thank you. I'm curious about the monitoring of the pumping after the excavation is complete. What happens at that point is there further monitoring? And I guess that's
Yeah, Mr. Buswell,
When the pond, you're referring to when the borrow pit operation is stopped.
correct?
Mr. Buswell?
Can you answer that question, please?
Once you stop dewatering, the water table will return back to its standard elevation, which fluctuates, annually. The banks are required to be planted with wetland-type species as part of the restoration plan, and then it will sit in perpetuity as basically a lake. It'll look like a water body. Was that the question? Yeah. There is county requirements for basically restoring or reestablishing the banks and so forth, and we're all consistent with the county ordinance on that.
Thank you. That's what I wanted to hear.
Okay. All right. We're going to open the floor up to, can we have the county staff come forward now? Ms. Adair? Good morning, sir. I'd get your name for the record.
Keith Abramson, County Forester.
You've heard the presentation this morning from the applicant. Is there anything you would like to add, or what is the major concern that you have on the forestry side?
Some of our major concerns are we feel like the wetland delineation is accurate. We had a meeting on site with district staff and the consultant, and portions of the wetland now extend all the way to the south side of Pond 1, which this would potentially impact a wetland system. Their consultant and the district was in agreement that that wetland is in that location. Some of our other concerns are that some portions of the wetlands, buffers, and conservation easements have been cleared and filled. We're trying to work through that with their consultant for restoration plans, and the basic setback. The code states, regardless of the radius of influence, that there shall be a 25-foot setback from the wetland buffer. So the plan is not consistent with that. The plan also, or the code also states there should be no long-term or short-term drawdown of the wetland system. That's what the code says. That's what the council wanted We're enforcing and interpreting the ordinance as provided.
So what you're saying is what my concern was previously, that the elevation of the wetlands is extended beyond the actual normal condition of a wetland because of the pumping?
I'm not sure why the wetland line has changed. That could be a reason. It could be that the line was inaccurate to begin with. I can't speak to, what that change is, but everybody was in agreement on that day, which was June 30th, 2023.
Because my experience is every time I've seen a drawdown going into the wetlands tend to increase in size and have an effect on the surrounding area.
I have seen that as well.
Okay. Okay. Mr. Costa.
Keith, right?
Yes, sir.
Tell me about Terracon.
We sent out a bid for a third-party review as required by the code. Terracon was the low bid. They reviewed the plan per our code. As they stated in their plan that this, the rehydration meets industry standards. I've heard a lot about the St. John's only requires a 50-foot buffer. The county can be more restrictive. In a lot of cases, our codes are more restrictive than the state. The plan, was reviewed, and they noted that there was a drawdown. Now, it's 10 feet within 100 feet of the wetland, 1 foot within 500 feet. You've heard from their consultant that the rehydration offsets that. We don't have, staff doesn't have an opinion of that. I'm not a hydrologist. I'm not going to speak to that.
So my question really is on Terracon. So were they reviewing the county codes, or were they reviewing the application for reduction and the distance to the wetland?
They were reviewing the plan in accordance with the county codes.
The current plan that we're looking at today?
The submitted, yes.
Asking
submitted
for a
application
reduction in the overall, okay.
Yeah.
And the reason I bring that up is because there's a letter in here from July 6th, signed by a Mark Mulligan, right? And I'm looking at this conclusion where it says, overall, dewatering construction plans employ acceptable industry standards as required by the county zoning code for a special exemption. Monitoring plans and the associated rehydration program utilize generally accepted practices to ensure protection of area, water resources, and adjacent wetlands. Are you in agreement with the consultant's conclusion?
I'm not going to disagree with their conclusion. I mean, they are an expert. The county code states that there should be no short-term or long-term drawdown.
And then let me read this as well. It also dated July 6th from Terracon directly to you. And the second to the last paragraph reads, in quotes, although there is some uncertainty related to wetland setbacks and the lack of information to support modeling for dewatering analysis, overall, dewatering and construction plans employ acceptable industry standards or industry practices as required by the county's zoning code for a special exception. So, and that's why I'm asking this. I'm assuming that this is referring to the plan as presented by Chemco.
Yes, that's the plan. But also, it doesn't meet that minimum 75 foot as required by the code also, so
No, I understand that doesn't meet, I mean, we're looking at a variance here.
Yeah.
But my question is, the consultant says that their variance that they're requesting, a consultant is supporting their findings, that it would not be a detrimental drawdown to the wetlands. Is that correct?
Well, they were stating that they're implementing industry standards.
Okay. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Costa. The requirement in the ordinance that was passed and increasing it to 250 feet, what was the driven factor behind that?
That was a council decision.
There's a little bit of history, so this isn't, so when that discussion occurred, there was a study done on borrow pits in the St. Johns County, and the recommendation from that study was, in order to protect the wetlands, there should be a minimum distance of 300 feet from the wetland. It's in the ordinance. So they justified that distance requirement based on that study. However, because land is unique, they provided this mechanism for which, if you can reduce that distance, if you can demonstrate these certain criteria. So they simultaneously increased the standard to 250 feet, which was consistent with the study that was provided to County Council, that 300 feet was the minimum to protect wetlands, wildlife habitats, and things like that. And they also stated, okay, but we know each project is unique, so they created this mechanism.
Okay. But in the specific in the ordinance, it says, and for temporary drawdown, and the applicant is claiming that the report is not correct. Is that correct? Am I reading this right?
I would ask the applicant what they're asserting. I'm not going to put words in their mouth.
Okay. Well, he's objected to the report. That's the point. And Ms. Adair, would you like that?
Yes, may I just maybe clarify a little bit? Ginger Adair, I'm the Environmental Management Director.
Yes, once they get through making, and then I'll let you cross-examine. They're both with the counties. Okay.
So maybe this will help. So the report that was provided by the applicant shows that there is wetland drawdown at the distance that they're asking to move the borrow pit. It's 16 feet of drawdown at the edge of the wetland. What they're saying is that modeling is insufficient to account for the rehydration, right? So their own modeling is showing drawdown at the wetland edge. So we, as the staff, were saying, well, that doesn't look consistent with the ordinance. Neither of us, right? We don't have hydrogeologists on staff, right? That's part of why this third-party review. So the question then was, okay, if the modeling is showing drawdown at the wetland edge, how do we get, how does that meet the ordinance? The answer from the applicant was that it doesn't account for the rehydration. So now we're at a position where when we do the third-party review, the third-party reviewer said it meets industry standard. What they did not say there's no drawdown, because there is in fact drawdown. The modeling is insufficient to account for the rehydration. So we're really at a point where the question is, does the rehydration in fact mitigate that drawdown? I don't know the answer to that. That's why there's the third-party review. They didn't make that statement in their review. They just said it meets industry standards. So hopefully that helps a little bit. That's sort of where we're at. The other really big issue is that the ordinance says there's a 50-foot wetland buffer, and in addition to that buffer, there's a required 25-foot setback between the construction and the wetland buffer. So the reading of the code is that you can't ever be more than 75 or closer than 75 feet. The plan that we have is 50 feet. So if you throw out the rehydration argument altogether, the plan that has been submitted, it does not meet the 75-foot required separation from the construction to the edge of the wetland. Hopefully that helps.
And what is your opinion on the setback as far as the 150 to the 250, or because the soils, there is a difference in the soils from one county to the other. So what may be their recommendation in one county of 300 feet may not be proper to put that in place in Volusia County.
Right, and that I will say that St. John's report that was mentioned at the council meeting and we've looked at in other discussions about wetland buffers has a lot to do with not just the drawdown from some sort of excavation, whether it be a borrow pit or anything else. It's also about protecting the other functions of a wetland, including functioning as wildlife habitat. And so that 300 feet in St. John's was saying if you want to protect 50% of the species that rely on wetlands, you want 300 feet of buffer between whatever development and that wetland. So a lot of that report was about the other benefits of wetland, not just the hydration issue.
Okay. One of the concerns also was that if there was an impact to the wetlands, the remediation of that would be tremendous, would it not be?
Right.
I remember back when this originally came before us, and And that was some of the concerns that was brought forth when they asked originally for the 50 feet.
Yes, so the Water Management District does require monitoring of this project and other borrow pits. The monitoring is, the reports are due annually. So, there is a question about if something goes sideways, and you get an annual report, then what is the way that you can mitigate for whatever those impacts are? Again, not being a hydrogeologic expert, I would say that, the Water Management District is reviewing that monitoring. But wetland restoration is expensive, and if something went wrong, then, but they, as part of their environmental resource permit, would have to do that restoration.
Okay. Mr. Costa, you had a question?
Yeah, two things. You said that, so Terracon didn't answer your question specifically. They basically answered it vaguely by saying it's acceptable practices.
Yes.
And why didn't we go back at them and get a more concise or specific answer to the question?
We did, in fact. We received the report and we said basically what you said. Okay, I'm not sure that answers our question.
Right.
And I think the issue, and you may want to ask Mr. Buswell, the issue is limitations in modeling, right? And I think that Terracon agreed with that, right? This project is consistent with how other borrow pits are done. But does it cause drawdown at the edge of the wetland?
So there's an inconsistency because there's a lack of modeling, correct?
That has been what we have heard from the Water Management District and from the applicant.
So is it possible this project could be used as one of those modeling examples for future? That's a possibility. And then the other question I have is you mentioned, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but let me make sure I understood this right. It's possible you would be supportive of a 75-foot buffer?
It would be up to this body to determine if it meets the criteria of the drawdown or not the drawdown. But from the strict interpretation of the zoning code, there is no way to get closer than 75 feet.
Okay. So, but if this application was coming in at 75, would you look at this differently? Would you have a more favorable view of it than at 50?
I think, again, we would still have the question of, is the wetland being impacted by drawdown? That's a technical question that still hasn't been answered. But we would not have the further objection that the plans as drawn don't meet the code.
Good. Okay, thank you.
Okay, we don't have any other questions. I'm going to let the attorney come back. Don't go anywhere because he's going to cross-examine you. All right.
I'd like to
Yes, sir. Come.
I'd like to question Mr. Abramson first.
Okay.
Good morning, Mr. Abramson. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing well. How are you?
You say that you're the county forester? Is that your position?
That's my title, sir, yes.
What is your educational background in forestry?
I'm an ISA certified arborist,
You're an ISA certified
International
arborist.
Society of Arboriculture certified arborist, sir.
Do you hold a license in Florida as an arborist?
I have a certification from ISA that I am an ISA certified arborist.
But you don't hold any licenses, is that correct?
I'm not aware of any licenses.
What is your educational background?
I have some college, and I do not have a degree. I have 20 years, almost 21 years experience here at Volusia County. I am a FWC authorized golf course agent, and I've been trained by DEP and the Water Management District in wetland delineation, and have been doing wetland delineations for over 20 years.
Have you ever been recognized in a court as an expert in wetland delineations?
No, but I've never had the state overturn one of my delineations in 20 years.
The state overturn, you mean what's?
Overrule?
The Water Management District?
Yes, sir.
So your position is the Water Management District agrees with your delineations on every case?
Well, I would say that they have never disagreed with me. Do you have the right to go on private property as the county forester? If you have a signed permit, I do.
And what's your purpose in going on the property?
To do inspections, I mean, if you've applied for a permit or have a permit, that gives the county the right to entry and to inspect.
And what kind of notice do you have to give the property owner before you enter the property?
I'm not aware of any notice.
So you just go on anytime you want?
Well, you apply for the permit that invites us to the property.
That's your position, correct?
Well, Paolo, can you rule on that or speak to that, please?
I believe you coordinated with the property owner at that point when you inspected that, the property, when you examined the area. Did you coordinate with the property owner?
I coordinated with St. John's River Water Management District.
Okay.
And was invited by their staff, and multiple emails asking for an invite to the property to
Can you
determine.
Can you describe the permit application and the provision of allowing inspections?
Well, they have a tree removal permit and a wetland alteration permit on site. And once you apply for that permit, we would come out, we would do inspections. We don't typically notify the applicant or the property owner that, hey, we're going to be here such and such day. But if there's a meeting or they request a meeting, then yes, we would coordinate with them or the other parties.
I'm just trying to establish what requirements there are for notifying the property owner when you come on the property so that there's not a concern about trespass. And that's all I was trying to clarify. Do you have any expertise in hydrology?
No, and I've stated that.
So you can't comment on drawdown or any of those issues?
No, and I've stated that as well.
Okay, I have no further questions. Thank you.
Okay. I think it's part of the permit, Mr. Sawyer, that you got to allow them to come off. And
Yes, that's the question.
To me, to give them a 2-week notice, I'm going to be out and long enough to shut the pumps off. Okay. Mr. Averson, I don't think we have any other questions, so you can sit down. Okay. Ms. Adair?
Good morning, Mr. Bear. How are you?
Hi,
Okay.
you need to speak into the mic.
Keith, you can go ahead and have a seat, sir. Thank you.
Ms. Adair, what is your educational background?
I have a bachelor's degree in environmental management from Rollins College, and I have 2 master's degrees from Duke University, one in environmental management and one in public policy.
And have you been recognized as an expert in environmental issues by any court in the state of Florida?
Not by court, no, sir.
You don't have an engineering degree.
I do not.
Have you observed any impact to the wetlands?
No, sir. I haven't been out on this site.
You mentioned the modeling and then the impact of rehydration. We do have some evidence as to what the impact of rehydration is on the site, don't we? Because we have 3 years of excavation experience.
I don't know the answer to that. What I know is that the documentation that was provided by the applicant as part of this submittal shows drawdown at that wetland, and the answer when we had a meeting was that the modeling is insufficient to account for that hydration.
My question is a little more direct than that. My question is, does the monitoring that's occurring of the staff gauges, you know what those are,
I do.
does that show any drawdown of the wetlands?
I don't know the answer to that. I'm not familiar enough with that modeling to answer.
And wouldn't that be a good indication as to the effectiveness of the rehydration?
It may be. It would certainly be about the excavation as it exists now, not necessarily predictive of the excavation as proposed.
Well, if the excavation as it exists now, which is mining and recharging, extends, that's not going to change anything, is it? We still have the same function of excavation and rehydration.
except that the proposal expands the footprint closer to the wetlands. So I can't really answer that question.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Okay. We don't have any questions here. Mr. Dare, when the council put a 250-foot setback, was that done more for so as an insurance policy in the event that there was something that drastically affected the wetlands? Is that the way they looked at it when they put that in place?
Well, I cannot necessarily speak for the council. I'll say that first of all.
Well, we have a different council too. So.
We do. But the discussion at the time was that wetlands are worthy of protection. Excavations and developments like that have an ability, have the potential to impact those wetlands, and a larger buffer was their preference rather than a smaller buffer. However, as Mr. Soria pointed out, there was a lot of discussion about, does one size buffer work at every site? And so the ability to demonstrate no impact to the wetland was added to the language as that sort of fallback. So if you have a site where you can demonstrate that there isn't any drawdown, then the council was interested in allowing excavations to occur closer to wetlands. So, but my belief at the time was that they were trying to provide more protection to wetlands, not less.
Right. That's what I saw also, because we originally had the 150. They requested a 50. When they got through with it, it was 250. So you be careful what you ask for. Okay. All right. We don't. Yes, we do, Mr. Costa.
Actually, I don't have a question for her. I'd like to bring the applicant back up if possible.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Dare.
I would also like to recall.
Could I bring you back up? Could you come back forward, sir? Go ahead, Mr. Costa.
You're representing the applicant, correct?
I am.
Okay, so my question is this. With the amendment to reduce this down to 50 feet, it actually gives you an additional 100 feet of excavation area. How many cubic tons or yards of material are we looking at here?
I think the estimate is about 500,000 yards.
500,000 additional?
Yes.
To what you're already getting out?
Approximately, yes.
All right. So obviously, I mean, there's no shame in trying to get an extra dollar out of every job site. I'm in the same boat as you, but at the same time is we're looking for a area that is common ground, compatibility between what the county wants and the council wants and what you guys need. So I'll pose the same question to you that I asked of staff. If 75 feet were on the table, would that be something that's palatable to your client?
I think 75 feet is certainly better than
The 150.
feet. Yes.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Thank you, sir.
I would like to put on a rebuttal case.
You'd like to do what?
Put on a rebuttal case. I'd like to recall Mr. Boswell.
Okay. All right. Might as well get it out here. Mr. Boswell, go ahead.
Mr. Boswell, you heard what was stated about the drawdown graph in the application that you submitted to the county for the borrow pit.
Correct. And Ginger was correct. There is not a dynamic modeling software that allows for this analysis of what we're actually doing. So what was directed or provided by staff was to use a drawdown equation that is standard practice. It's, if you're putting in a well and you draw down, it gives you the cone of influence. It's not dynamic, it's static, it works. You plug the numbers in and that's what the drawdown gives you. I was directed to provide that, but again, without the hydration going into the wetland, the results are different than what you would actually expect is occurring out there. But again, there's not published software to actually model that, or we would have.
As an engineer specializing in drainage, do you have the competence to make predictions, accurate predictions about what the drawdown with the rehydration would be?
Yes.
And again, what is your conclusion about drawdown?
Again, and kind of taking it a little bit further, the state, the St. Johns River Water Management, has multiple scientists, engineers that have done evaluations on many different areas, and their guidelines are 50 feet, basically. So they've studied that, so there's assurance in that distance or separation they're comfortable with, so that's why they issued the permit. But yes, I have comfort that the drawdown that is occurring, through the rehydration is negligible. It doesn't affect the wetlands, or we would be seeing impacts to those currently.
And again, what do the 3 years of monitoring of staff water gauges prove?
That there's not an impact to the wetlands.
Do they also prove there's no drawdown?
Yes.
Thank you, I have no further questions.
Before you leave, we do have a question for Mr. Costa.
Got a lot of questions today. St. John's Water Management,
Yes.
50 feet. What are the stipulations for that 50 feet?
Basically, they have the upland buffer to avoid secondary impacts. And again, when, from my standpoint, when we're designing, different systems, there's really not a difference between a borrow pit or a stormwater pond. Maybe the length of construction, but I've designed stormwater ponds that are smaller or bigger than the borrow pits that are proposed here. To my knowledge, there's not a difference in setbacks between a stormwater pond, but as soon as you say borrow pit, the construction is the same, the excavation is the same, the impacts or non-impacts, they act identical as far as I'm concerned. So I don't know if I answered your question.
You didn't.
Okay.
So at the 50-foot mark, is there the same requirement as far as drawdown that we're talking about? We're talking a lot about wetlands, the drawdown on the wetlands. Is the 50-foot requirements with St. John's Management the same as far as what they require, as far as zero drawdowns or a percentage of drawdown?
Correct, yes.
Okay, and it's the same as what we've got here on the 150. So you're telling me that the 50 foot versus the county's code of 150, the drawdown requirements are identical?
I don't know if the county actually has a drawdown. There's not a established number. Like you're allowed 3/10. Worked with Lee Kissick for years at the district, and have stormwater ponds adjacent to wetlands, and we would always look at what is the effects of that, and where's the discharge. Are you taking the water away from the wetland, or are you hydrating to it, discharging to it? So again, the district's permitted this at 50 feet with a 50-foot upland buffer.
My other question is, I've got some familiarity with mitigation of wetlands. And so I know there's different qualities or categories of wetlands, correct?
Yes.
What category of wetlands are we dealing with here?
That one I would defer to Amy, but I believe they're good quality wetlands.
Quality A, let's say?
Yeah, they're not fringed, that are kind of marginal.
So they're
good
worth protecting and keeping as
Yes.
pristine as possible then?
Yes.
That's where I was leading with that
Yeah,
question.
they're good wetlands.
Okay, thank you.
I can call Amy back to give you a direct answer, sir.
That would be great.
Yes, Amy? Ms. Daly, based on your inspection of the wetlands on site, what category would you assign to them?
I would say that they're a good quality wetland. There were no signs of impacts to the hydrology. The vegetation component looks healthy. The soils are hydric, which are wetland soils, so I would say they're in good condition.
Did you have the opportunity to look at those wetlands prior to the excavation or just post-excavation?
Post-excavation.
Post, okay, thank you.
Any further questions for Ms. Daly?
No,
Thank you, sir.
no, we
That
don't.
concludes.
The other question I had was, are we at the maximum separation now of the 150 feet they were allowed to go?
It was, the original permit was approved under the old rules at 150 feet
Right.
minimum. I don't know There are some portions that may be greater than that, but, based on what those supposed wetlands were, they're supposed to be 150 feet from it.
Are they at the 150 feet now?
When you say now, you mean the current?
Currently.
I'll let,
Because he keeps on referring back to what the impacts are. My question is it completely excavated out at the 150?
There are 4 different pits. The northernmost pit is most complete, but there's still work to do on the remainder. So they still have about 2 years of work left to do on them. They're not at the 150 feet yet.
They're not past the 150 feet. Okay. That was my question. Okay. All right. Do we have anyone else that the public would like to speak to this case? We're going to close the floor for public participation and open up for commission discussion. Mr. I think that Mr. Bender.
My question is, we've heard a lot of scientific testimony and people's qualifications and all of that good stuff. Mr. Sawyer, my question is, does the county have the right to be more restrictive than any other agency in the protection of their wetlands if they so choose to?
yes,
They do?
yes,
So regardless whether we're at 50 feet or 400 feet, it's Volusia County's position to be able to protect it if they so choose to do so.
yes, the protection is kind of a setback from both the wetlands and the buffer to protect both the wetlands or the buffer. Those are set separate from the water management district standards, which are, impacts to the actual wetland itself. Once the district claims jurisdiction, we are preempted by whatever their mitigation is on the impacts of the wetlands. But, outside of the actual wetland area, we have the authority under our police powers to protect those wetlands.
Okay, so I'm kind of thinking that regardless of what testimony we hear here today, all of this is kind of above our pay grade. And I think we need to follow whatever the rules say and then let the county council decide what they want to do with this deal.
Right. You are in a quasi-judicial capacity, so it's the application of the evidence to the rules. So there's 2 points of kind of contention. One is, the drawdown question, and the other is their plan meet the minimum 75 feet, regardless of the area of influence, and that 75 feet is composed of the 50-foot buffer and the 25 feet from the 50-foot buffer. So those are the 2 areas of kind of contention and discussion.
Is that it, Mr. Bender? Okay. I remember when this case come before us before, I was definitely against the 50 feet. And after the discussion, I felt, and I think the council obviously felt, that 250 feet would be more appropriate. I think they went a little bit, that insurance policy, as I keep on referring to, went a little bit overboard, but I'm comfortable with the 150 feet. I'm comfortable with extending the permit till they can get the other pits dug out to the 150 feet, but I'm not too sure. Matter of fact, I know I'm not comfortable with the 50 feet. And that was part of the council's discussion when it went to council the last time. They weren't comfortable with it at all. So as far as the 75 feet, my point goes back to once the damage is done, the damage is done. The remediation is very difficult to any wetland, and that is a very, like Mr. Costa stated, it would be considered, would you say a Class A wetland? And so it's very important to us in Volusia County, and that's why we have these ordinances. The council, like I said, I think went to the extremes with the 250, but I have no problem with the 150 and extending the permit out to where they can continue the excavation till they meet that point. Because I think their permit expires this now, correct?
No, they have an existing permit that's good for, 2 more years. So they're not asking for an extension of the existing permit, I don't believe. I think they're asking for an expansion of the area and an additional 2 years, but they currently have the right to excavate up to 150 feet to the wetlands right now.
Okay, in this thing, it says the county development order requires the excavation and reclamation to be completed in the year 2024.
I believe they have 1 year left on their permit then.
So I don't think they can complete the excavation by the 2024. That's the reason I'm even mentioning this, is I'd be willing to do the extension at the 150, not the 250. But if they needed to do the extension, but I'm not willing to do the 50 feet. That's me personally. And obviously, the board has their comments that they would like to make, I'm sure. Mr. Costa?
Yeah, well, this is, as they say, got to break a few eggs to make an omelet, right? And I see this as an opportunity for the county, possibly not in the way this is written. It's not something we can approve here, but I'm just making this as a footnote, is that there's 4 different pits on here that potentially, if an agreement can be raised between the county and the applicant to basically take one of those pits and use it as your modeling bed and keep the other ones as is at the 150 and use one to get that data that we don't have. And I'm not an expert at this at all. I'm just looking at how to smooth out this transition moving forward. And this isn't going to be the last borrow pit that comes in front of us. It certainly wasn't the first one in my time here, so I think it's the second one or the third one since I've been here. So there's more to come. And my question is, rather than going through and beating this same thing over and over again, can we use one of those pits as a modeling tool for future information and allowing us as well as the council to make educated decisions and responses to these requests?
Are you suggesting the 50 feet or 75 feet?
I would say, well, again, if we're using one as a guinea pig and they're asking for 50, and if the St. John's is at 50, I believe, is that correct, or was it at 75? I don't recall now. There have been so many numbers thrown at us.
Well, the issue is currently the code as written does not
I understand.
permit reduction below 75.
Right. This is just me basically vocalizing for those who are listening that there is an opportunity here to use this, turn this into a learning tool for both the county, long-term. Doesn't apply to what we got in front of us. There's no amendment I'm going to make or motion I'm going to make to add that in there. I'm just making that as a footnote to staff and to the county council in general.
I think 50 feet would be just too close, no matter how we look at it. And going back to Mr. Averson, you know, he may not have a degree, but what he does have is experience, and he's familiar with the local area. And I don't think he's been around here all your life. Is that right, Mr. Averson? Yes.
But if I may, Chair, but to clarify, is 50 feet not the minimum requirement by St. John's Water Management, or did I misunderstand that?
No, it is.
50 foot is their minimum, correct?
Their minimum, yes.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. But I don't always agree with St. John's Water.
Well, trust me, nor do I.
So I'm looking at it from a county point of view and what the impact would be if there was a negative impact on the wetlands, and what would we do in that case, you know? I mean, we're digging these ponds and retention ponds and borrow pits all over the place, and I'm just not comfortable with the 50 foot at all.
I'll speak for myself. I have a tendency to always run with the underdog. But in this particular case, there's just not enough data here for me to be able to sink my teeth into this and give this a sense of approval. I don't have I don't have the weapons, I don't have the bullets to put in the gun to make this work for me, personally.
All right, any other commissioner discussion on this? I would accept a motion at this time. Come on. We need a motion. Ms. Craig? Would you like this? Oh, that was Mr. Bender, I'm sorry. Mr. Bender?
I'll make a motion that case number S-23006 be forwarded to the county council for final action with the recommendation of denial.
You second it, Mr. Okay. I've got a motion from Mr. Bender for case S-23006 to forward to county council with a recommendation of denial, and a second from Mr. Patterson. Any discussion on the motion?
Do we want to add the 2 staff recommended conditions, 4 staff recommended conditions?
It's a recommendation of
The recommendations, yeah.
This is I believe the motion was to recommend denial.
Denial, I understand that.
So
Okay.
we don't need the recommendation.
All right.
Okay. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Okay, that takes care of the old business, unfinished old business, and we're going to move right into the new business. So if Ms. Shelley, could I get the first case read into the record, please?
Yes, sir. Case number V-23-085, variances to the minimum yard requirements on urban single-family residential R9 zoned property.
Thank you, Ms. Shelley, and this is Mr. Hanson.
Good morning, Michael Hanson, Planning Development Services. This particular variance application has 2 variance requests. The intent of the applicants is to site a swimming pool within the front yard. They have a conforming R9 site that has a house that was built in 1977. However, a unique feature of the property is the depth of the property at 50 feet in depth. Because of the depth of the property, it makes it difficult for the applicants to site a pool within the applicable code that we have regarding the setbacks. Because in the R9 zoning classification, there's a 25-foot front yard setback, and then a swimming pool, as is planned, without a screen enclosure, would have to have water's edge be no closer than 8 feet from any side or rear yard line. So due to the configuration, staff, when evaluating the criteria, determined that they do have a unique circumstance. However, the remaining 4 criteria for granting a variance, staff could not find that the applicants met, and therefore staff has a recommendation of denial in the case, noting that they could potentially develop a swimming pool and meet the applicable zoning ordinance for it. However, it would require a redesign of the proposed pool. It is worth noting, though, that the applicants did receive 6 letters of support from various neighbors within the community. I'm available for any questions that the board may have.
Thank you, Mr. Hanson. Any questions for staff? All right, hearing none, is the applicant present? Okay, can I get you to come forward, please? You've heard the staff report. Anything you'd like to add to it? Can I get your name and address for the record? I'm sorry.
My name is Amanda Harbinson, and my address is 866 Sheepshead Avenue in New Smyrna Beach.
Okay, you've heard the staff report. Anything you'd like to add to it?
I would just like to add that we do have a very unique property. Our backyard, I mean, I can barely stand in the backyard and put my arms out to the sides without touching my house and the neighbor's fence. We purchased this property at the end of March and have done a huge remodel on the property. It had not been touched since it was built. We have redone the entire property. The neighbors are loving our family and having us around, and the fact that we've made this property so much better. And to us, it is not the front yard, it's our backyard. You know, the sliding glass door off my kitchen goes out to this side yard that's our backyard. I mean, we don't essentially have a backyard. So we're asking to put a pool in our backyard.
Okay. Any questions for the applicant?
No, I just have excuse me, a comment that we do have a lot, obviously your neighbors are in support. You have a lot of letters that we've received supporting your project.
Thank you.
Okay, you can have a seat.
Thank you.
Do we have any public participation forms for this case? Anyone like to speak to this case? Hearing none, we're going to close the floor for public discussion and open the floor to commission discussion or motion.
I'd be happy to make I'd be happy to make a motion to approve case number V-23085, variance to the minimum yard requirements on urban single-family residential zoned property, subject to the 2 staff recommendations in our report.
Second.
I've got a motion on the floor to approve variance V-23085 with the 2 staff recommended conditions from Ms. Shelley and a second from Mr. Sixma. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously with Mr. Costa not here, stepping out for a moment. Okay, Ms. Shelley, could I get the next case, please?
Yes, sir. Case number V-23-087, a variance to the minimum yard requirements on rural residential RR zoned property.
Thank you, Ms. Shelley. Ms. Ray, this one is yours.
Good morning, Kristen Ray. The applicants are seeking a variance to reduce the north side yard from 15 feet to 3 feet for a proposed 1,200 square foot detached garage. The property does conform to the rural residential zoning classification, but it is an atypical lot abutting Lake Beersford. It is unique in shape. It is narrow at the road frontage and does widen towards the waterfront yard. Staff's recommendation is for denial. A letter of support was included in the staff report package from the neighbor to the north that would be most affected by the variance request. Should the PLDRC find that the applicant has provided competent substantial evidence, the following condition has been provided for consideration: that the variance is limited to the size and location as the structure shown on the variance site plan. I'm available for questions.
Thank you, Ms. Ray. Any questions from staff? Seeing none, is the applicant present? Good morning, sir. Could I get your name and address for the record?
Good morning, guys. Brett Fudge, 2141 Pontoon Road, DeLand, Florida.
All right, you've heard the staff report. Anything you'd like to add to that?
Not really. I mean, that's about the only spot we could put a garage in the front yard. Everything to the south of that location, which would be in front of the house, is where our septic tank, propane tank, there's a lot of utilities in the ground. And it's a narrow property, so that's about the only spot it's going to fit if we're able to add a detached garage to our property.
Okay. Do we have any questions for the applicant? Okay. You're 3 foot off. What's the purpose for 3 feet? You couldn't go any further off the property line than the 3 feet?
No, right now, our current driveway, that's kind of where we park. There's a septic tank, our drain field, everything is in that area. We have a pretty good sized boat. It's a long trailer. It's 30 plus foot. That area, as you go up farther, we have a difference in our neighbor's elevation. So it's kind of I don't want to say it's a wetland, but it holds water. So this is a high and dry area which we would feel comfortable, putting a garage in its walking distance to the house when storms and stuff come, and it just helps protect our assets. So that was the best location we could put it. Anything south of our current driveway is not really wide enough to house that size of a garage. Both properties north and south of us have similar buildings. The neighbor to the north, we do have a letter of support. He's all for it, and he actually has 2 detached garages on his property. The property to the south has 1 detached garage.
Okay. All right, let's see if we have any public participation. If we do, I'll give you a chance for rebuttal, and if not, oh, wait a minute, I got Ms. Craig.
The survey shows a driveway that goes up to the proposed structure. Is that driveway already in place?
No, it's not, and that was kind of proposed, but talking to the wife, I don't think she wants it there. So it's not going to be a permanent thing. It's going to be grass, and we're just going to drive over as needed. Because it's for an RV or our boat, but the boat pretty much stays on the water. So it's nice to have a place to keep the trailer protected, I guess you would say. So that driveway that's drawn in that doesn't exist probably will never exist. It's going to be used very minimal to access that side of the garage. The main purpose is to protect our daily driving vehicles and pulling from the front side or I don't know what you want to call it, the south side of the garage.
Okay, thank you.
Just to clarify, the neighbor to the north, which will be the closest one,
Yes.
that's the neighbor that recommendation of approval?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. We'll see if you have any public participation. If we do, I'll have you come back forward. Okay, we don't have any forms. Anyone like to speak to this case? Hearing none, we're going to close the floor for public participation. Up for commission discussion or motion.
I will make a motion, case V23087, for approval with the one staff recommendation.
Second.
Okay, I've got a motion from Mr. Sixma to approve variance V23087, and it's with the one staff recommended condition, and a second from Ms. Shelley. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Ms. Shelley, could I get the next case, please?
Yes, sir. Case number V-23-088, a variance to the minimum yard requirements on urban, single-family residential R9 zoned property.
Thank you, Ms. Shelley. And Ms. Ray, this one's yours also.
Good morning again. The applicants are seeking a variance to reduce the west rear yard from 20 feet to 13.5 feet for a proposed covered patio. The proposed patio is to be constructed in the same footprint as an existing concrete slab. That concrete slab has been in place since at least 1988 and was a part of a previous sunroom that was demolished between June of 2015 to November 2016. Staff's recommendation is for approval. 4 letters of support were included in the staff report package from adjacent neighbors to the north, south, east, and west. I'm available for questions.
Thank you, Ms. Ray. Any questions for the staff? Seeing none, is the applicant present? Could I get you to come forward, please? And could I get your name and addresses, names and address for the record, please?
Salvador and Dawn Rivas, 3916 Oriole Avenue, Port Orange, 32127.
Okay. You've heard the staff report. Anything you'd like to add to that?
We just absolutely love this place. It's our little getaway, heaven on earth, and we love Volusia County, so only good things.
Okay. Okay. Do we have any questions for the applicant? All right.
I do.
Okay, Mr. Costa.
I was sneak that one in quickly. Was there a previous screen room or patio room on that pad?
Yes, sir. Prior to us buying the property, there was an area there that they had built the slab.
Mhm.
I don't know, 4 or 5 inches, I think. And then it was a closed-in room, yes.
It
And
was a-
so
mhm.
the person that we bought the property from decided to remove it probably around 2016.
Oh, okay, all right, so it wasn't there when you guys purchased it, just the slab was in place?
Correct,
And
yes,
so-
sir.
And you're looking to do, basically put the screen room back on?
Yeah, just basically at this point a roof, just
Right.
because the sun is too strong
Sure.
in the afternoon and
Mhm.
it just hits up the house and will probably reduce, air conditioning and all
Okay.
that stuff. Yes, sir.
All right, thank you.
Okay. We don't have any other questions for you. We'll see if we have any public participation. If we do, I'll give you a chance to come back up.
Okay.
If not, we're going to close the floor. Okay?
Thank you very
Thank you,
much.
sir. We don't have any public participation forms. Anyone like to speak to this case? Hearing none, we're going to close the floor for public participation and open up for commission discussion or motion.
I'll be glad to make a motion.
Ms. Shelley, go ahead.
I move that we approve case number V-23088, a variance to the minimum yard requirements on their urban single-family residential zoned property, subject to one staff recommendation.
Second.
Okay, I've got a motion from Ms. Shelley to approve V-23088 with the one staff recommended condition, and a second from Mr. Sixma. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Okay, Ms. Shelley, can I get the next one, please?
Yes, sir. Case number V-23-089, variances to the minimum yard requirements and accessory dwelling units, ADU regulations, on urban single-family residential R5 zoned property.
Thank you, Ms. Shelley. And Ms. Ray, this one is yours also.
Good morning. The applicant is seeking 2 variances for an existing accessory dwelling unit to be able to apply for an after-the-fact building permit and resolve a code violation. Variance 1 is to reduce the east rear yard from 20 feet to 10 feet. And variance 2 is to allow the ADU to be greater than 50% of the living area of the principal structure. The property is located on an enclave, mostly surrounded by the city of Daytona Beach. Staff's recommendation for variance 1 is for approval, as the structure was originally built in that location as a garage in 1967, before the Unified Zoning Ordinance was adopted in 1980. And variance 2, staff's recommendation was for denial. However, should the PLDRC find the applicant has provided competent substantial evidence, the following conditions have been provided for consideration. Variance 1 and 2 is limited to the size and location of the ADU as shown on the variance site plan, and the structure cannot be expanded without the request of another variance. I do also want to add that a letter of opposition was emailed in yesterday and was on your desk this morning.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Ray. Do we have any questions for staff? Seeing none. Ms. Ray, was this building converted to an ADU? Was it there structurally beforehand?
It was originally permitted as a garage and was then converted into an ADU.
Okay. And the size would still be determined as far as the garage to the ADU, is that correct? In other words, if it was still the garage, would the 50% be in play?
No, sir. Just because it was converted into an ADU.
It becomes the 50%?
Correct.
Okay, that's where I'm going with that. Okay. All right, is the applicant present? Oh, Mr. Costa, go ahead.
All right, I want to get clear on this one. The floor plan on page 8 of 19, that is how it exists currently? That is today's look?
Sorry, one moment.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Correct? And so what's labeled here as existing workshop, that's actually the living quarters or the ADU itself?
Yes, sir.
When you're doing your ADU calculation, are you also taking into account the enclosed carport and the open carport plus the workshop for the total percentage, or just what is considered the living quarters?
Just the living quarters.
Just the living quarters. So that workshop already exceeds the 50% mark of the original dwelling, correct? Okay, I just want to clarify on that. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Costa. And is the applicant present? Could I get your name and address for the record, please?
Sure. My name is Polly Hensley. My address is 1963 Forest Avenue, Daytona Beach.
Okay, you've heard the staff report. Anything you'd like to add to that?
I guess I know that I would be denied the second part because I am still with my code department. We are still working on that. I have a couple more things I need to get in, but this had to be done also.
Okay.
And that's where I'm at. in the process.
Okay. Any questions for the applicant? Seeing none, we're going to see if we have anyone in the public who'd like to speak. If we do, then what we'll do is I'll give you a chance for rebuttal after the fact.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank
Do we
you.
have any public participation forms for this case? Okay. You'd like to speak to this case? And after you speak, I would like for you to go over to Ms. Tucker and fill out a form. This is for you, and if you'll give me your name and address for the record.
My name is Anna Chan. I live at 1962 Forest Avenue, Daytona Beach, 32119, across the street.
There was a comment that you would like to make to this case?
Yes. I have been inside the dwelling unit that she has been converting. She already has been renting. She has had tenants. She has had roommates, and I oppose what she is doing, especially to open it up to rent to other people. Every 6 months, I check for registered sex offenders in my immediate area within 2 miles from me. I have a 4-year-old girl, and I have 2 registered sex offenders living within 100 feet from my house, which makes them 100 feet from her house. And they're a known factor for me. I know who they are. We have amicable, not amicable, but we have appropriate relations with each other as far as being amicable when we come outside the door. I have no way of knowing who she rents to, and over the past year and a half, some of her tenants have had animals. She's only been at her house half the time or less than half the time, so she's not there to see what happens while she's not there. And I'm outside in the yard when it's not raining because I have a very massive garden project going, and I have my daughter outside with me and my dog back there, and he's usually on a chain. The chain does extend all the way to the beginning of my driveway, but not to the end of the street. And she has had problems, well, I've had problems with her tenants' dogs coming over, and they have been starting to get aggressive. And the people that own these dogs, they just stand across the street and try to call them back, and the dogs don't come. The structure was originally meant to be a single-family dwelling unit, and I think for the safety and security of the rest of us who live there, it should remain that way, and that's all I have to say.
Okay, let's see if we have any questions for the speaker. Do we have any questions for the speaker? Okay, we have none, so would you like to do a rebuttal on this, Ms. Hensley?
I would.
Okay.
First off, this is my only residence I have. I also travel with my job. That's why she is referring to, I'm not there. I'm only there usually 2 nights, but my mother is there at all times, which resides at my house. The dogs are not mine. One of them is my past girlfriend that also was in the back that did not rent for me. I let her stay there. She was not paying rent at all, and the AUD was already there. She was in a dire strait when she came. She has since went back and settled back into Mississippi. She said that the dogs, well, we're not allowed on her property. That's why we stand off of her property. Her husband has been aggressive towards me, and that's why I don't ever go near that area. And yes, I do call, and they do come. And they accidentally get out. I have a fenced-in yard. They accidentally got out. I think they've gotten out 3 times. Sorry, that's it. Also, her dog, or her husband's dog, also has been in my yard and been very aggressive too. And I didn't appreciate that at all. So we have a relationship of non-existence right now with that person, but the rest of them all called me and said, no problem, go for it. And the tenant that I'm going to get, I always vet. I have a program that I vet everybody on that. I use it for a couple other places in Titusville. I use those. I don't own those. I manage them for that man, and I vet all of them. So I do have a program that I would always do. Let's see, what else was it that she said? Yes, sex offenders are in that area, and they are very kind to us and to them too. And I don't
Okay,
know what else to say.
okay. We don't have any questions for you, so I appreciate you rebuttaling that. Mike, I do have a question for legal on this. The dog, that we have a leash law, that would be a code enforcement issue, correct?
It would actually be animal,
Animal
not code
control.
enforcement. So specifically, depending whether or not the animal is on your property or outside of your property,
Right.
determines, the type of violation.
Okay, so that would be addressed through the animal control. As far as the ADU being used for a rental unit, how do we stand on that regulation?
So long as the rentals are not for less than 30 days, you are allowed to rent all or a portion of your property. Our provisions are for, less than 30 days is considered a hotel motel, but so long as whatever your rental periods are for longer than that, that is allowed within that zoning district.
So the rental would be allowed by right, because being that we don't have an ordinance or anything against that, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, I'm just clarifying this as we go along. Okay, and as far as the variance 1, that met all the 5 requirements, and variance 2 of the greater than 50%, and that was a structure that was there previously before being converted into the ADU, correct? Okay, that was my question. All right, you can ask.
I just wanted to add that the code people have told me all those rules and that I am compliant on those.
Okay.
And yes, it will be rented over 30 days.
Okay, Mr. Costa?
Yep, I need clarification because this is not clear to me. On variance 2,
Yes,
what is the actual size of the ADU currently?
840 square feet.
840 square feet?
Yes.
And your maximum allowed is 780, is that correct? This is for staff now. 780 is what she's allowed without the variance?
The 780 is over.
Is-
Just give me one moment.
So I see the 58.66% there, so that's where you're at 780. But you're telling me that it's currently 800, the living quarters, not the entire,
Oh, okay.
just the living quarters, yes. Which is the ADU itself.
Right.
Is how large
Correct.
currently? It's 780?
It is 780 with the awning or the.
Okay, and so did I understand you correctly? You said you were working with staff to go ahead and reduce that ADU, or you're keeping it as it is?
Keeping it as it is with my code people. They are working with me on getting it up to standards.
Okay, so the only way it can remain in its current condition is if we approve the second variance, correct?
Correct.
Otherwise, she'd have to move a wall to make it smaller.
Correct, yes. The only condition that we had is the structure couldn't be expanded without a.
Could not be expanded, yeah, if it was approved.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
I have to pay taxes on it now.
Okay, you can have a seat. Do we have any other public participation forums? Okay, we don't, anyone like to speak to this case? Yes, sir. I can get your name and address for the record?
My name is Edward Grun, and I live at 1962 Forest Avenue.
Okay, after you get through speaking, if I could get you to
Yep.
fill out a form.
Yes, sir.
Ms. Tucker to my immediate left here.
First thing I'd like to note is the supposed aggressive dog that she mentions that I have is the service dog at my side here. And I can have lots of people attest to the fact that one thing he isn't is aggressive. All right. The dogs that she has over there have been coming over almost daily, whether she's there or not. The people that she has living there at her house, that she plans to use this dwelling to rent to, she has enough people living there that as often as not, we have tenants parking throughout the neighborhood in other people's property without their permission. Okay, and then they're out there working on that property till midnight, 1 in the morning. And so this has become a nuisance for the neighborhood. And so I just want to point that out, that if this is allowed to go forward, that this is going to continue to be a nuisance for the neighborhood. And also, I'd like to note the fact that when she moved in, one thing that Polly had told me was that, one, she's a nudist and she plans to have more of that at her house. In fact, she's put up a tarp along the back fence so that they can have their privacy. And not only do I have a 4-year-old little girl living with me, she has, her next door neighbor has 3 kids that are that age or younger. And they don't exactly have a really good fence between them to guard against any of that. So I think doing any sort of expansion on that property to allow more of that into the neighborhood, I would be totally against.
Okay. I would remind you that a lot of what you speak of would be considered a code violation. And so unfortunately, we can't address the code violations. That would have to be done through the code board. And so we can't base our decision on a code violation.
Understand.
Okay. Or I don't. I shouldn't say we can't. I don't base it on, because you do have an avenue to proceed to rectify that issue. Okay?
All right.
Okay. Any questions for the speaker? Okay. Thank you, sir. I appreciate you coming forward. Okay, Ms. Hennessy, I will give you a chance for rebuttal, if you would like.
Although I did not see the violence, my neighbors did on his dog coming towards my house. And
It's hearsay,
I'm
yeah.
sorry, it's a hearsay. So same with everything,
Yeah.
and I am not a bothersome person at all around. That AUD is going to be rented to one person and one person only. I do have already vetted him, and he is fine. The code violations that he keeps saying does not happen. No one works after 8 o'clock out of my house. It's too dark. And
But you are aware of the code violation in the
absolutely,
event that
believe
would
me,
occur?
there is not any work doing on that dwelling down there. Has been stopped when I got my Cs. No one has done any work on that building.
Okay.
Okay, none whatsoever. And I'm sorry. And and they have been out to check.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much. Do you have a question? Okay. Okay, anyone else that would like to speak to this case? Okay, we're going to close the floor for public participation and open it up for commission discussion or motion. I will say that, unfortunately, we can't be the mediator between neighbor disputes, nor can we enforce code violations. And so me personally, I have to put that out of the equation. As far as I'm looking at strictly the variances that meets all the 5 criteria for variance 1. And variance 2, like I said before, the structure was there and she converted it. That's probably the reason why it's 50% greater, a little bit more than 50%. And therefore, and again, it's 8% of the not allowable size. Is that right, Ms. Ray? It's about 8% over 58. I think you showed 58 point something percent.
Yeah.
Okay. So that was my opinion on it. I will accept the motion or more comment. Okay, let's wake up here. Let me push my button down here. Wake up somebody. Is that what that, never mind. You get these people active over here. Come on, guys, help me out here. Let's go.
We're looking at you, Steve. The motion maker.
All right, let's make a motion. I make a motion that we approve a variance request number 1 on case V-23-089. And we approve variance request number 2 on case V-23-089 with the 2 staff recommended conditions.
Second. Okay, I've got a motion from Mr. Costa to approve variance V-23-089 variances 1 and 2, with the staff recommended conditions, and a second from Mr. Patterson. Any discussion on the motion?
I agree with you that we're not the board for neighbor disputes or code violations. It's strictly, this is black and white as far as the ADU is concerned. And hopefully they can mend those fences if possible. That's it. That's all I got.
Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Ms. Shelley, can I get the next case, please?
Yes, sir. Case number V-23-090, variance to reduce minimum yard requirements on urban single-family residential R4 zoned property.
Thank you, Ms. Shelley. Mr. Shams, this one is yours.
Hi, good morning. The applicant purchased the home in 1996 and constructed a carport to protect their vehicles. The carport was constructed without a variance. The home itself was originally built in 1981. The applicant is requesting 1 variance to the minimum front yard requirements to reconstruct the carport. They're asking to reduce the east front yard from 25 feet to 8.6 feet. According to the applicant, the carport became old and damaged, so they removed it with the intention of replacing it, which is why they're here today. The applicant provided a site plan indicating an attached 340 square foot carport. Overall, staff recommends denial of the variance because there is not a special condition on the property, and a carport is not a requirement for parking a vehicle. Should the PLDRC find competent substantial evidence, staff recommends 1 condition for consideration, that the variance is limited to the size and location of the proposed carport as depicted on the variance site plan. And I'm available for comment or question.
Thank you, Mr. Shams. Any questions for staff?
Do we know how long the previous carport was there?
I believe it's since 1996.
Since 96? It came down during a storm, or it just was
They
removed?
removed it in 2022.
22?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Nothing.
Is the applicant present? Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Your name and address for the record.
Ted Lindsay, company address 835 Sunshine Lane, Altamont Springs, Florida 32714.
Okay, you've heard the staff report. Anything you'd like to add to it?
Yes. First of all, the carport was not in bad shape. It was old. However, Hurricane Ian and Nicole both took it down. In fact, we have video showing it during the storm coming down. The house was purchased in 1996. The carport was in existence at that time. Also, where the garage would have been, which is their family room, was converted from a garage to a family room years before they purchased it. So there is no place for them to park undercover and get into the house without getting soaking wet. This is the exact same size as the carport that was there. There's no changes, no enlargement, no reduction, no reduction. So I just think that this is a replacement of an as-is carport that, again, was damaged and taken down by the hurricane. He did not take, I think he took 2 poles down. Everything else kind of wrapped around a tree.
Okay. All right, sir. Any questions for the applicant? Okay. I do have a request here from Greg. That's what I'll say. Would you like to speak, sir? Okay. And I'm not going to request the name and address because he is the owner.
Okay, thank you. I'd just like to echo what he said. When we purchased the house in '96, we purchased it from some of my wife's family members who were elderly at that time. The garage had been closed in because they took care of elderly people. So inside of that, which is now a living room at the time, had 2 sectioned off rooms where they took care of elderly people. Anyway, that being said, the structure was good, the carport was already there, albeit at that time, the style of carport, which was open pan. Hurricane, which one was the first one? Nicole? I don't remember. I think Ian was the first one. Whichever one. The first storm started loosening it a little bit, but we assumed everything was good. The second storm just started, we had like 80-mile-an-hour crosswinds, and I was outside doing some stuff in the backyard. My wife came running to me, and as soon as I came around front, it was starting to come apart. I had 4 cars on the driveway at the time. I was able to started getting my truck, her car out. As we're backing her car out, the camera is showing the carport coming apart. And subsequently did $30,000 damage to 4 cars from the metal coming apart. We had a palm tree on the southwest corner of the driveway. Fortunately, as it's coming apart, and we're trying to keep it from coming apart and blow, it starts wrapping around the palm tree, which prevented it from going over into the neighbor's yard and damaging her 3 cars. Okay. Additionally, of course, we started trying to get our mindset once the storm subsided and we started trying to clear some of the metal away and stack it. I found a 20-foot piece of metal roof from the carport behind our house, behind the fence line. Anyway, I may be over speaking or something, but we just want to replace what we had. We still have damage to the front of the house that we're going to have to fix once the carport is, if we get it put back up. That's all we want, is just to get our carport put back. We're not trying to, everything that was there when we bought the house was there. We didn't tear anything down other than removing a couple pieces of metal that were still attached to the house. Okay. But I didn't prepare because I didn't know I could bring pictures and video and whatever. I've got it all right in front of me. So
okay,
we just want to put it back the way it was.
I do have a question for Ms. Craig.
The replacement that you're talking about building, is it being built to a higher standard that will hold up to storms?
Yes. Yes.
Yes, the carport has been engineered and designed to current Florida building code, which I do believe is 135 miles an hour.
And so what was there before did not meet that
Yeah,
standard?
every couple, 3-4 years, the building code evolves, especially in our industry. The fasteners are bigger, the wall thicknesses are a little bit more, spans are less, so you gotta go to a bigger beam. If that was there before 1996, it probably only had to withstand 90-mile-an-hour winds. But over the years, it's loosened over just having storms rack it, and then it just finally came off. But yes, this is designed and engineered to current Florida building code.
Okay, thank you.
It's enclosed pans, right? It's not open pans yet. It's like 400-pound weight limit or something. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
I thank you for your time. That's all we asked for. That's it.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Do we have any participation forms for this case? Okay. All right, we're going to close the floor for public participation, open up for commission discussion or motion.
I'll make a motion, case B-23-090, the motion to approve the variance with the one staff recommended condition.
Second.
Okay, I got a motion for Mr. Costa to approve variance V-23090 with the one staff condition, and a second from Ms. Shelley. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Okay, Ms. Shelley, could I get the next case, please?
Yes, sir. Case number V-24-001. A variance to reduce minimum yard requirements on urban single-family residential R3 and resource corridor RC zoned property.
Thank you, Ms. Shelley. Mr. Shames, this one is yours.
Hi, good morning. So the subject property is a waterfront lot, and it's zoned R3 and RC and developed with a single-family home and in-ground swimming pool. The home was originally built in 1990, and the current owner purchased it in 2022. The applicant is requesting a variance to reduce the minimum waterfront yard to construct a pool screen enclosure over the existing pool. They want to reduce the yard from 25 feet to 6.6 feet. In July 2021, the county updated the waterfront yard requirements from 10 feet to 25 feet at the recommendation of environmental permitting. The applicant provided a site plan that shows a screen enclosure over a 1,242 square foot area of the existing pool and brick patio. The applicant also received a letter of support from an adjacent neighbor. Overall, staff recommends approval of the variance with the one staff recommended condition that it be limited to the size and location as shown on the variance site plan. And I'm available for comments or questions.
Any questions for staff? Hearing none, do we have any, is the applicant present? Please come forward, state your name and address.
My name is Harold Stevens, 4236 South Peninsula, Port Orange, 32127. I bought this property approximately a year ago, and ever since then we've done quite a few improvements around the area. But one of the things that we are not able to control along the river is the bird migration. We're approximately 200 yards from the Halifax River, but in this bay area that we are constantly invaded by the birds and the ducks and everything that goes along with it. And what I would like to do is construct a screen enclosure over it so I could enjoy my pool, continue my rehab. I was unfortunately run over by a race car 1987, and so I need to continue doing that. I did take a picture on Saturday. This is my neighbor's yard of all the birds that are migrating into the area and stuff. So that's all we really request, is just to build a nice pool enclosure to enjoy our property.
All right, sir, if I could get you to give up that photograph to Ms. Tucker to my left and make it part of the record. Okay. And we don't have any public participation forms, or do we have any questions for the applicant? We don't have any questions for you. So we're going to see, we do not have any public participation. All right, sir. We're going to close the floor for public participation and open up for commission discussion or motion, okay?
I'll make a motion that we approve variance request case number V-24-001 with no conditions.
Second.
Okay, I got a motion on the floor from Mr. Costa to approve variance.
Revise that, please, Mr. Chair, with one staff recommended condition, please.
Okay, one condition.
Second.
You good? Okay. I got a motion on the floor from Mr. Costa to approve variance V-24-001 with the one staff condition, and a second from Ms. Shelley. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Okay, Ms. Shelley, can I get the next case, please?
Yes, sir. Case number CPA-23-012, Administrative Large-Scale Comprehensive Plan Amendment from the Environmental System Corridor and Forestry Resource Future Land Use Designation to the Conservation Future Land Use Designation.
Thank you, Ms. Shelley. And this is Ms. Ray.
Hello. If it pleases the commission, you can read in the following rezoning into record. I'll be able to discuss both as their companion cases.
Okay. I didn't know they were companions. Okay. Ms. Shelley, could I get you to read that into the record, please?
Yes, sir. Case number Z-23-012, Administrative Rezoning from the RC and Forestry Resource zoning classifications to the Conservation C zoning classification.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, now Ms. Ray.
Thank you. This is an administrative comprehensive plan amendment and rezoning. This is a housekeeping task to make the rezoning and land use consistent with the intended use as a public conservation land. The comprehensive plan amendment is from environmental system corridor and forestry resource to conservation. The two parcels are approximately 856.85 acres and was purchased with the Volusia Forever program in the St. Johns River Water Management District Land Acquisition Program. It's intended for the preservation and protection of our natural resources and passive recreation for the public. Staff recommends that the PLDRC find the future land use amendment consistent with the comprehensive plan and forward to County Council with a recommendation of approval to transmit to the Florida Department of Commerce for state coordinated review and the Volusia Growth Management Commission for certification. And then the rezoning, is from resource corridor and forestry resource to conservation. The rezoning to conservation will provide the maximum protection for the publicly funded conservation acquisition. It will have a positive impact on the environment and natural resources as it provides land for the Florida Wildlife Corridor and the Volusia Conservation Corridor. And staff recommends forwarding the rezoning to the County Council for final action with a recommendation of approval. We do also have someone from Resource Stewardship in the audience if you have any additional questions.
Okay. Do we need them to come forward on this case? Anyone think so? I think we're good. Okay. Do we have any public participation on this case? Okay. Okay, we're going to take the first case we're going to close the floor for public participation and open up for commission discussion. We'll take, or motion, we'll take CPA 23012 first.
I'll be glad to make a motion.
Okay.
I move that case number CPA-23-012, that we find the future land use amendment consistent with the comp plan and forward this application to the County Council with a recommendation of approval to transmit to the Florida Department of Commerce and coordinated review for the Volusia Growth Management Commission for certification.
Second. That's a lot of talking you're doing.
I'm going to repeat it.
Yeah, exactly. Wow.
Okay, I've got a motion on the floor from Ms. Shelley for CPA 23012 to find the future land use amendment consistent with the comprehensive plan and forward the application case number CPA 23012 to the County Council with a recommendation of approval to transmit to the Florida Department of Commerce for state coordinated review and to the Volusia Growth Management Commission for certification. And a second from Mr. Patterson. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Now we'll take the next case, Z 23012. Open the floor for discussion or a motion.
I'll be glad to make a motion.
Okay.
I move that the Planning Commission forwards the rezoning application, case number Z-23-012, to the County Council for final action with a recommendation of approval.
Second.
Okay. I've got a motion on the floor from Ms. Shelley to forward the rezoning application case number Z-23-012 to the County Council for final action with a recommendation of approval, and a second from Mr. Sixma. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Okay, Ms. Shelley, could I get the next case, please?
Yes, sir. Case number Z-23-013, the rezoning from the prime agriculture A1 zoning classification to the rural agriculture A2 zoning classification.
Okay, Ms. Ray, this one is yours.
This is a rezoning of a 15.08 acre parcel from prime agriculture A1 to rural agriculture A2. Property is developed with a single family residence, barn, and accessory structures. The applicants are requesting the rezoning in order to split the parcel into two and separate the barn from the single-family residence for a horse boarding business. This will help allow the applicants to maintain the agricultural classification on the barn while reducing the insurance premium on their residential home. Surrounding the area is a mix of single-family residences and agricultural uses. The parcels to the north and the west are zoned A2, and the parcels to the east and the south are zoned A1. The existing future land use is rural, and the proposed A2 is assumed compatible. Staff recommends forwarding to the County Council with the recommendation of approval. I'm available for questions.
Thank you, Ms. Ray. Any questions for staff? Hearing none, is the applicant present? Okay. Applicant's not here. Do we have any public participation? All right, we're going to close the floor for public participation. Open up for commission discussion or motion. I do have a question for staff. The A1 zoning, that's minimum 10 acres. A2 is minimum of 5. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. That's all I have.
Now that you opened up the floor, I got a question. Because I'm looking at the location of the barn and the residence. You're going to split these two parcels. Are they going to share a common driveway? Are we going to have another variance for a setback issue, depending on where they draw that line? Which I'm assuming it's up there between the trees, between the barn and the house. Are we opening this up for other possible violations down the road? And should we address them here, now, rather than making these people come back again? You're shaking your head now.
What the next step will be for them to go to land development, where they will submit the survey and their plan for how they want to split that. We can't guess ahead of time what they will do.
Okay, so that, at that time, then we may see them again with the variance for the split, potentially.
Potentially.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, because I think it's a 40-foot setback, isn't it? And would that front part be there towards the barn be considered a front yard or back? I think, well, no, they're going to make the 40 feet. I don't know how they're going to do it. Okay, but anyway. Okay, we've closed the floor. Going back to what I said, I'll accept the motion. Or if you any more
I'll be glad to
discussion
make a
on it.
motion that we forward the rezoning application, case number Z23-013, to the County Council for final action with a recommendation of approval.
Okay. And I got a second from Ms. Sickler. Okay, I've got a motion on the floor from Ms. Shelley for Z23013 to forward the rezoning application case to the County Council for final action with recommendation of approval, and a second from Mr. Sixma. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. I will make a comment to staff that in the event that some of these people think because it's being forwarded with a recommendation of approval, that automatically gets sent through, the applicant needs to be aware that they should, I know they don't have to be, but they should be here.
It's always recommended that they show up.
Okay. All right. Ms.
I had the word highly in front of that. I think that will help.
Share with you, that's what our Kelly is for. She contacts every single person before the meeting, transmits the reports to them, and follows up with them to remind them of the meeting. So we are very proactive about making sure they're here.
But do they realize that they could get in front of us and it could go south on them?
Yes, sir.
Okay. That's their buyer beware, right? Okay. Ms. Shelley, could I get the next case, please?
Yes, sir. Case number excuse me. Case number Z-23-015, rezoning from the prime agriculture A1 zoning classification to the rural agriculture A2 zoned classification.
Okay, and this is Ms. Ray also.
So this is a rezoning on an 11-acre parcel from prime agriculture A1 to rural agriculture A2. The property is currently developed with a single-family residence, garage, and a barn/ADU. The applicants are requesting the rezoning and able to to be able to subdivide the property for a family member. The barn/ADU will become the principal structure on the second parcel. The surrounding area is primarily developed with single-family residence and agricultural uses. The existing future land use is rural, and the proposed A2 zoning is assumed compatible. Staff recommends forwarding to the County Council with a recommendation of approval, and I'm available for questions.
Thank you, Ms. Ray. Is the applicant present for this one? There we go. Good morning, and it's still morning. So you've heard the staff report?
I would just like to say that
It's that fallback thing.
that Kristen and Kelly were both great to work with, and Kelly did follow up repeatedly and make it clear that you should
Okay.
probably be here.
All right, you've heard the staff report. Anything you, state your name and address.
My
for the
name's
record.
Terry Tillis. I live at 8250 Via Hermosa Street in Sanford.
Okay, you've heard the staff report. Anything you'd like to add to it?
No, we're just rezoning so we can subdivide like they indicated. We're going to actually, our daughter is engaged and getting married in 2025. So we are going to, I coerced her into moving into that barn apartment so she can still be close to her mom. At least for a little while.
How big of a fence? Okay. All right, any questions for the applicant?
No.
Okay, I don't think we got any public participation. Okay, we're going to close the floor for public participation, open up for commission discussion or a motion.
I will make a motion that case Z23015 be forwarded with a motion of approval to County Council.
Okay, I've got a motion from Mr. Sixsmith for Z23015 that we forward the rezoning application to the county council for final actual recommendation of approval, and a second from Mr. Patterson. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Okay. That wraps it up for our cases. Do we have any other public items?
No, sir.
Do we have any staff comments?
Just two.
Go ahead.
I want to brag for a minute.
Okay.
I'm very proud of the planning staff that we built over the last 2 years. And I have two announcements. The first is Kristen Ray to my left was just promoted from Planner 1 to Planner 2. So we're excited about that.
Hey, congratulations.
And then Michael Hansen to my right just passed his AICP exam, which now makes him a professional planner. He's a certified planner now, so.
All right.
All right.
He's all smiles.
I was going to say, he's very excited.
Congratulations.
I can tell.
Is that why you didn't get very much to speak today, Mr.
That's right,
Hanson?
he's certified.
We made
She
him
did all the
study
talking,
nonstop.
right? Okay. All right, any commission comments? Mr. Costa.
According to this, it says Mr. Santiago. So my first comment is, can tech, I know you're back there behind that glass somewhere, is there any way of having that updated? Because it's become very confusing, I know, for the chair, and if I had to slip over to his spot, I wouldn't know who I'm calling on. Is that something that can be easily be taken care of?
So we don't currently have an IT person.
Oh, you don't?
in
I thought
there.
there's nobody behind the glass? There's
No,
nobody watching me back there?
But I'll reach out to IT to see a way about orchestrating something for our meetings
That would
to
be-
clarify.
Be very helpful, especially now that we're using the request.
Well, just know I'm Mr. Dempsey down here.
And then my second question is, I noticed the parking lot is finished. Do we have an update on what our future parking status is going to be going forward?
We'll have Kelly check on that.
Because it was packed full this morning.
Yeah, I parked on the street.
You know, you added more parking, and as soon as you add more parking, you have more cars. Like, it's the way it works.
The request was submitted yesterday afternoon. I'll just follow up with facilities to see if we need to correct that going forward, but it
There was a
was
request
submitted
to be
today.
coned off?
Yes,
Oh,
I
yeah,
did
'cause there
submit
was
that
no-
yesterday.
There was no spots that I saw. So,
Yeah,
okay.
nothing.
Yeah. Or cones, for that matter. So, okay.
Okay.
And I would,
It's raining.
I would say Mr. Costa and our chairman had some very good questions on the very first case. I commend you guys for that.
Thank you.
I think you throw out some
Excellent
things that
point.
we didn't, you know, so, good questions.
Mm-hmm, very helpful.
Any other commission comments? Okay, I would like to thank Ms. Smith for the fruit.
Yes, thank you, thank you, thank you.
I know I'm going to enjoy.
I can
Be
eat for
ready to
another
bring
week.
some more?
Great.
You're going to start something here. And we're going to get out of here before noon today. Here we go. All right, do we have any press and citizen comments? This meeting is adjourned.
Good.